current administration's views on transparency, it's becoming more clear than perhaps ever before that we need to be proactive in getting access to the information that will allow us to know what is actually going on in various parts of the government. And thankfully, there are organizations designed to help streamline that process. We're joined by the founder of one, founder of Muckrock, Michael Morrissey, joins us on the Damage Report now. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Great, thanks so much for having me.
Good to have you on. So your organization, which is a combination of both a resource that stockpiles government documents and also makes it easier for activists and journalists and regular people to get access to this through Freedom of Information Act requests. What I'm interested to, first off, since I've actually never gone through this process, how has it been generally? How complicated of a process is it to get access to these sorts of government documents?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things is it's really intimidating, and it's also hard to figure out what you can actually ask for in the first place. And so we started out in 2010 with the goal of just kind of making this an easier process, and then also making it easy for people to share their requests. So one of the key things with Muckrock is you can file a request through Muckrock. We encourage you to file that publicly so everybody else can follow along, so other people can learn from what you're doing. And it doesn't have to be a challenging process. I mean, I think this is a really beautiful fundamental democratic right that the government works for you and you have a right to know what they're up to.
Exactly, and especially we had the scandal with ICE, down at the border and all that, and some of our reporters at TRT Investigates have done a great job in filing these sorts of requests and finding out about distributions of resources, the acquisition of ICE of new weapons and things like that, the money they were spent on getting like former CIA trainers and things like that to come in and train people working at the border, and that information was obviously out there. It could have been acquired by anyone, but it took this sort of proactive step to actually get it. So through your organization, what have been some of the areas that you've been involved in terms of helping link up journalists with this information, or that your organization itself has released?
Yeah, so we're an open site. Anybody can sign up, file a request to the site. So we have a real amazing variety of requests flowing through us. We have a really amazing diverse group of users who go after really important issues. In particular, we've looked at a lot of records around prisons and privatized prisons. We've looked at a lot of criminal justice issues. We've had a lot of users kind of dig into everything from use of force policies in various cities around the country, but also sort of federal policies, looking at, like you said, ICE policies and how those are changing under the current administration. We also take a look at a lot of historical files. So we have a book coming out later this year looking at sort of the FBI files of famous writers and sort of tracing how the FBI has sort of tracked people who dare to speak out, and sometimes in ways that are pretty uncomfortable for a democracy.
Wow.
Hi, Michael. It's Shivala. I've actually used your site before. Can you actually, before we even go any further, can you tell people why they have this right, like the potted history of it, basically? Because I think a lot of people are still unaware of what the Freedom of Information Act means, why it came about, and what it gives us, and why it needs to be protected.
Yeah, so I think the story of the Freedom of Information Act really comes down to sort of eroding trust in government, particularly after Watergate. A lot of people are sort of saying, hey, maybe we should be able to keep a closer eye on what our government is up to in our name. And a lot of trying to figure out sort of how do we have a government that's accountable and responsive to the people. But these traditions in some cases go back hundreds of years, where essentially if you're going to have a government of the people and for the people, it needs to be accountable to the people. And so under the laws, there's a federal Freedom of Information Act, as well as each state has its own law. You have a right to kind of go to the government and say, hey, I want to see this document. I want to access this data. And unless there's a rule that specifically exempts that information, they're supposed to hand it over. Now, in practice, it can be a little bit tricky. Agencies can charge you large fees. They can sort of cite exemptions that if you don't know how to push back against them, can limit that access. But it's amazing how much of this important journalism, how much of important accountability does come out of public records requests, the Freedom of Information Act requests that people are able to use. I think way more transparency comes from FOIA and public records than out of leaks, and people often underestimate that.
So I've certainly seen indications in the news where the Senate Intelligence Committee or the House or something will say that they've been asking for certain types of information, maybe financial documents or something like that, and they've publicized the difficulty in actually getting that information either at all or in a timely way. When it comes to these sorts of requests, it seems fundamentally like if the process was being obstructed or slowed down, it would be more difficult to ever actually find out about that. So to the extent that you're aware, has the process of you doing these requests, getting the information, has that changed at all under the Trump administration?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. So I think FOIA has been notoriously slow, and it's only gotten worse over the years for the most part. The Obama administration was widely criticized for being slow on FOIA, and the Trump administration, as far as our data shows, is even worse in terms of sort of speed. You can wait years for requests. There's one story where a woman actually sued when her husband died. She sued to inherit his request, and so that sometimes things can take a long time. The first year of the Trump administration, however, we didn't see things get noticeably worse than they were previously. What our understanding was is that a lot of top administrative officials just weren't aware of FOIA and so didn't know to obstruct it. What we've seen over the past year, however, has been things seem to be getting a little bit worse. You're seeing a lot of FOIA offices, the EPA, the Department of Interior in particular. A lot of times you're seeing more political influence in what's typically a bureaucratic process, and that's a really worrying sign.
Yes, certainly with the amount of information, especially out of the EPA that we know in terms of the corruption there under the former head. The Interior probably doesn't want people getting to know about some of the sales that are taking place in some of these former protected environments. Look, Michael, I want to thank you for joining us. Look, running an organization like Muckrock, anything that makes it easier for people to get involved, to know what's actually going on and to take an active role in their government is great. So thank you for your leadership there at Muckrock.
Thanks so much, and hope people check it out.
Thank you so much for watching this video from The Damage Report. Please don't forget to like the video and also to subscribe to the channel so that you get notified as soon as new videos become available. To hear even more about both this topic and other issues not being covered nearly enough by the mainstream media, you're gonna wanna tune in every morning to our full hour-long show. That's at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, available on the TYT Network channel on YouTube TV.